You sacrifice yourself and your own needs in order to feel safe in that environment. So you become a master of reading the room, of reading facial expressions, of understanding what people's triggers are and anticipating the storm before it comes for your own survival and your own safety.
Welcome to the Lyssn Podcast, your space to tune out the noise and tune in to the wisdom that already lives inside you. I'm Alyssa, and through soulful conversations and grounded reflections, we explore what it means to live your bliss, to walk through life aligned, intuitive, embodied, and lit up from within. Because the answers you're seeking, well, you already hold them. The real question is, do you have the courage to listen?
Hello, listeners, and welcome back to another episode of the Lyssn Podcast. I'm so glad that you're here. My name is Alyssa, but if you already know me, you can just call me Lyss. Now, today's episode is a juicy one. It is a conversation for the sensitives, for the empaths, for those of you who really feel it all. We're going to dive into how this dynamic comes about and how this dynamic shows up in our relationships. So if you're not a sensitive, if you're not an empath, but maybe you know one in your life, this episode might help you to understand those tricky dynamics where sometimes things just don't seem to be sitting quite right in relationships, whether that's a platonic relationship or it's a romantic relationship or even just, a family relationship. I think it's really important for us to dive into it and just have a look underneath that, what it looks like when empathy becomes self-abandonment, because I feel like this is something that happens a lot. Okay, the person I'm really talking to in this episode is the one who really understands so deeply that they abandon their own hurts because they can see everyone else's. Someone who's constantly justifying someone else's behavior because you can see their trauma, you can see their hurt, you can see their abandonment. All right, let's get into the juicy stuff. Let's go into a little bit of the psychology behind this. If you are somebody who is justifying and downplaying mistreatment, just know that that's not actually random. It's a pattern. And what we want to do is just dive into the dynamics behind some of the attachment styles that are playing out in these relationships. Now, if you already know a lot about attachment styles, don't worry, I'm not going to go deeply into these. We're just going to give a brief explanation of each of the attachment styles that can be playing out in this type of dynamic, and then we're going to unpack it a little bit more. So we have anxious attachment. That is the person who overgives, the person who over-explains, the person who is deeply fearful of being left and rejected. We then have the avoidant attachment, who really craves that closeness and that love, but doesn't feel safe in that dynamic, so will often push it away. And then we have the disorganized attachment. This is like the fearful avoidant who is stuck in the loop of wanting love and craving love, but expecting pain. Now, you'll often find if you look back on your relationships, let's use a romantic relationship. If you look back on your romantic relationships, there's often themes that kind of reoccur. Now, if they're not reoccurring themes, if it's something that stopped at a particular point in time, you can usually find the point in time where you did the inner work in order for you to stop calling in that energy in a relationship, to stop attracting that towards you. And if it's something that's still showing up and you're consistently saying, I don't want this thing in a partner, I don't want this thing in the person that I'm looking for, but it continues to present itself, that's where you need to do the inner work to ask yourself, why does this keep showing up? Where am I incongruent with this energy? And why is it that it continues to present itself? Is this a lesson that I haven't learned yet? Is this a dynamic with somebody that I need to nip in the bud at the very beginning of a relationship or of a connection? Or is it something that keeps presenting itself and this is the universe's way of testing me and I keep saying yes to that person and then getting frustrated when that continues to show up? Does that make sense? So we're not just reacting in relationships, we're often repeating cycles of energy until we actually become conscious of what we're doing and why it is that we're doing it. It actually often begins for many empaths in childhood. If you had emotionally immature or volatile or unavailable parents, you most likely learned to survive by hyperfixating and hyperattuning yourself to their moods and to the energy of the house that you grew up in, always wondering what version you were going to get of your parent. Were they going to be emotionally stable today, or were they going to have one very tiny thing that would set them off? And in order for you to create safety, what often happens is you become so hyper attuned to what it is that that parental figure is needing in any given moment that you sacrifice yourself and your own needs in order to feel safe in that environment. So you become a master of reading the room, of reading facial expressions, of understanding what people's triggers are and anticipating the storm before it comes, for your own survival and your own safety. And this is where we would ask questions like, is it even safe for me to feel something right now? Or how do I keep the peace so that I don't trigger something today? So you've probably heard of the fight, flight, freeze, or fawn response. And this is that fawn response. Now, I want to emphasize the fawn response is not because you're weak. It is actually because your nervous system is attempting to find the safest space for you to retreat to. And your nervous system actually became wired for survival over self-expression. You may now be completely attuned to regulating everybody else's emotions and not your own. So now as an adult, you might actually feel responsible for everybody else's emotions. You might feel guilty for taking up space. You might mistake people pleasing for being a good person, and you may really struggle to actually say, this hurt me, or this is what I actually need in this moment. For so long, you didn't feel safe voicing how you felt or what you needed because you were too busy attempting to manage somebody else's needs and emotions. Now, if you resonate with this, firstly, I want to say, I see you. I was you. I understand, and I'm so, so sorry that you had to abandon your truth for somebody else. That you had to abandon your deepest inner knowing because you needed to feel safe. I also don't want you to beat yourself up for this. I want you to know that this response was your body's way of protecting you and your mind's way of protecting you. And now you get to let it go. You don't have to hold on to this anymore. That part of you doesn't need to lead anymore. You are safe, and you get to come home to your truth, to your voice. You get to express those inner parts of yourself that you have had to mute and push down for so long. Your voice, your needs, your emotional truth, they matter just as much as anybody else's, and they do not need to be silenced anymore. Now let's have a look at how this often will play out. Okay, I'm going to give you some examples so that you can potentially reflect on your own life and see where it is that you might be self-abandoning. And it often is self-abandonment in disguise, right? So when you rationalize bad behavior, saying like, oh no, they didn't mean it in that way. Or it could be feeling guilty because you have certain needs. Or it could be saying yes to something when your body's wisdom is actually screaming no. It could be completely disregarding your emotions and your feelings for somebody else's emotions. Like if you bring up something with a partner or a friend or a family member and you say, I'm feeling this way, and then they come back at you and say, well, you make me feel this way, and you completely disregard what it was that you were originally attempting to communicate with them, and you flip into protection and making sure that their emotional needs are met, that is a huge one. This is that trauma survival response. This is that fawn response. This is you appeasing those around you and staying small in order to keep the peace. But I want you to know that your nervous system deserves more than just survival. Now, in today's culture, red flags equal run for the hills, right? Block them, cancel them, cut them off. And although in some instances, of course, that is all you can do to protect your peace, I do feel like we've lost the art of repair We're so quick to ghost somebody, but we forget that not everybody is hurting you on purpose. And I think a lot of us have become afraid of having those real deep, honest conversations. And we've lost the ability to connect with somebody and to understand that just because that person feels a particular way and they have a particular opinion, it doesn't mean that that makes your opinion invalid or that what it is that you feel doesn't matter. It absolutely still matters. And we can hear each other's, we should be able to hear each other's opinions and actually acknowledge that person without necessarily having to agree with each other. It's that mutual respect that we used to have when you were having a conversation and you may have had differing opinions or differing ideas, that we no longer understand how to have those types of conversations. We're too quick to cancel everyone. But here's the truth. People actually can't change what isn't reflected back to them. If you don't say to them, this hurt me, how can they grow? And I know as an empath, this is the hard part. Conflict can feel like danger, but I want you to know that lovingly showing up and naming a pattern that somebody has is actually courageous of you. You're not being cruel. You're not being nasty to them. You are speaking something that you need, and your needs are just as valid as the other person's needs. Now, I'm not saying that you need to go in there guns a-blazing and pull out all of your receipts and be like, you said this and you did this and yeah, right? It's not about blaming. It's not about, shaming or naming people. This is the process of showing up with love and with kindness and with courage and owning what it is that you need in order for a relationship to move forward in its most healthy manifestation. And it's not calling someone out, it's calling them forward. This is what conscious, mature love looks like. And again, like I said, it doesn't have to be a relationship love. It can be a platonic love between you and a friend. For you to lovingly call out a dynamic is more than okay. It is necessary. And understanding that if that person can't or won't take that on board, that's not yours to own and that is not yours to carry. A lot of relationships are built on foundations where your self-abandonment is actually their gain because they're getting more out of the relationship, knowing that you're not going to be there for your own needs, you're going to be there for their needs. So if you do find that you do step into a version of your truth where you are speaking your needs into existence and that person can't meet you, that's where we start to look at this type of relationship dynamic and ask, is this a dynamic that's actually serving me? Or is this a dynamic that keeps me small to build up somebody else's ego, somebody else's world, somebody else's idea of self-importance? So if they can't or they won't receive it or show up in the way you really need them to, then it is time to lay down that burden. It is time to let go and let God, as I say. That's when you really need to honor the reflection that you offered to that person and stand in your own grace. You need to honor your inner truth, your authenticity, and your integrity, and stand true to that version of you. The more you do that, the more you are going to feel powerful, the more you are going to show up in the world and spread your light for others, and that is going to have a beautiful ripple effect out into the world. So, how do we stop abandoning ourselves and start honoring our truth? Here's a few different things that you can attempt at home to see if this gives you a little bit of extra oomph and that little bit of courage to really speak your truth. One thing that is really important is practicing nervous system regulation. Breathe, close your eyes if you need to, and take deep breaths. Remind yourself with a mantra, I am safe. Ground yourself and regulate. And this is where we rewire our inner dialogue. I am allowed to understand you and your needs whilst also choosing myself. I am safe to choose myself over choosing your peace. I can love you without tolerating being mistreated. And then lovingly and courageously speak what it is that you need and require. Now, this does take practice, so you can practice this in the mirror if you like. There's an amazing exercise that you can do. If you have something that is living rent-free in your head, an old interaction that still, whether it was a capital T trauma or a little t trauma, that still is living in your body, and whenever, for whatever reason, you're in a situation, you get that same kind of feeling, it takes you back into that moment, particularly if you feel like you get caught on your words and you can't speak up for yourself, or you even get red and flushed in the face, or maybe you start crying, or whatever that response is in your body. Really picture that moment. Close down your eyes, hand on your heart, hand on your womb space, breathing deeply, re-envisioning that moment. Put yourself back into that exact space that you were in. And then what I want you to do is take the power back away from the other person. Take a breath, and whenever you feel ready and you have that bravery and courage, speak up. Speak up for that past version of you that you may not have been able to speak up for at that moment in time. You know, we always think about it after the fact and go, I should have said this and I would have said this. I wish that I'd come up with that in the moment. So really go back to that moment for yourself and stand up for yourself in that moment. This could be a childhood moment. It could be something that happened to you last week. Moving forward, when you're in a situation with somebody where you do really want to speak your truth, here are some phrases that may help you. Things like, I'm sorry, that doesn't feel good for me. Or, I really want to continue this conversation, but right now I'm not feeling safe to do so. Or, no, I'm not okay with that and I actually want to talk about it. Little things like this are your baby steps back to self-respect. And they're going to help you rebuild the bridge back to your heart, back to your soul, back to your sovereignty, back to your softness, and back to your truth. Pivot points. So, pivot points are where we can keep repeating the familiar pattern over and over again, or we can pivot to something that's a little bit more true, a little bit more aligned, a little bit stretchy probably, but something that is going to be a little bit more on the path that is going to help us become our best and highest version of ourselves. Because I've always been a seed planter, and I find when we get to a crossroads, it's important to remember that every single choice we make, no matter how small, holds so much power. Now, that's not meant to scare you, that's meant to excite you. Let's imagine that you have someone who is an authority figure in your family, and you have expressed to them previously, I don't like it when you do that, that really hurts me, and yet they've continued to do it. Now, you may justify their behavior, understand that they have certain things that they've experienced in their life, whether it be capital T traumas or little t traumas, that have led them to feeling like it is okay to belittle you in front of other people in a joking manner, even though you've already expressed a boundary that you are not okay with that type of behavior. You can stay quiet, you can internalize and tell yourself they didn't really mean it, they don't know better, they don't really understand how much it hurts me. And you can attempt to just move on without saying anything and keep shrinking yourself and keep shrinking what it is that that inner voice is saying, eroding your trust and quietly closing your heart. Or, option 2, you can calmly and kindly speak your truth. You can reflect their impact with clarity and love, speaking your truth. Not owning if they are not able to show up in the way that you require them to, and understanding that whether or not they change, you will. You're not going to allow this kind of treatment and this kind of behavior in your relationships anymore. You understand that you deserve better, You understand that what you need is important, and you recognize that this pattern no longer serves you. So you are stepping up and stepping out into the version of you who feels safe to speak their truth, not to the detriment of others, but in a way that really honors who you are and your heart and your soul without hurting that other person in return. Reclaiming your truth, reclaiming your boundaries, reclaiming your power, not abandoning yourself for the sake of somebody else, owning your voice. So, my loves, I'm going to leave you with my favorite question. Have you had enough yet? Have you had enough? Have you had enough of justifying it? Have you had enough of explaining it away? Have you had enough of feeling invisible? Have you had enough of waiting for them to notice? Have you had enough of abandoning your own truth? Because the truth is, you are enough. You noticing is enough. Your voice is enough. Your needs are enough. And it is time to listen to that. So, my loves, as we bring this episode to a close, I want to leave you with what I call whispers from within. These are the internal whispers of wisdom that you have inside you. And I want you to tap back into that authority and really ask yourself what it is that that voice is attempting to tell you. So, you might want to grab a journal. You might want to use the notes on your phone. You might want to just close your eyes and meditate on this for a little while. It's completely up to you how you process, but I want you to take this with you into the rest of your day. Where in your life have you become so focused on understanding someone else's truth that you've forgotten how to hear your own? And if you stopped silencing that voice, what would it tell you to choose moving forward? Let it land. Let it permeate every part of you. Let it return home. Remember, it's always worth hearing. So, my loves, keep listening. Thank you for listening, beautiful soul. If you felt something shift, please reflect on it, share it, and let it ripple out into the world. If something spoke to your heart space today, I would love if you could share it with someone that you love and leave us a review, which will really help more of our soul fam to find their way here. If you want to connect with me, if you have questions, topics, if you want to know more about my courses, or if you even just want to say hi, please reach out. I would love to hear from you. Come find me over on Instagram at Lyssn Podcast. That's LYSSN Podcast. Or you can message me directly at Lyssn Natalie. My DMs are always open. Until next time, stay soft, stay true, keep living your bliss, and remember, your soul's song is always worth remembering. So, keep listening.